been misused. And you know what's in the President's Council on Sustainable Development? What's in the overview? It's not only sustainable communities, it's not only equity and health and the environment and supposed economic prosperity, it's not only education and international responsibility, it's population. It's population control. For the first time ever on paper, a U.S. policy for the stabilization of the U.S. population. How did we get there? Let's go back to Henry Kissinger, 1974, National Security Memorandum 200, making for the first time ever the United Nations goal of stabilizing developing world populations, part of the United States foreign policy to target developing world populations as a national security objective. What happened in between? You had people like John P. Holdren, now currently in the Obama White House, telling us that we need to do this here at home. They said in Ecoscience, Holdren and Ehrlich did, the law regulates other highly personal matters. For example, no one may lawfully have more than one spouse at a time. See the reductive thinking? You have to agree to the first step, then the next. Why should the law not be able to prevent a person from having more than 2 children? This is 1977. It goes on from there. There's one more quote. Indeed, it has been concluded that compulsory population control laws, even including laws requiring compulsory abortion, could be sustained under the existing Constitution if the population crisis became sufficiently severe to endanger the society. So you see how they move us down the field, and now you've got the executive branch, just in one small example of the larger executive branch overreach, now dictating on paper U.S. population size. You can see what some of their goals are. That's a whole another wormhole for another day, but it ties into the larger cashless control grid that they are pursuing. And so now we've got the CISPA bill back on the agenda. Here we have security experts sending Congress a letter on the Fourth Amendment busting CISPA. Indeed, it's an open letter from dozens of cybersecurity experts, inventors of the internet, IT professionals, and on, all saying don't do the CISPA bill and stop with these overreaching cybersecurity policies. You've also got Ron Paul saying the latest assault on internet freedom is Big Brother writ large, but you've got people like Senator John McCain and others saying, yes, we specifically need to curb civil liberties and hand over all data for the purpose of cybersecurity. Again, part of the ongoing Bilderberg agenda to legitimize the mandate for cybersecurity, to put all people of the world, especially in America, under the centralized database of larger command and control. With that said, we have TSA leaving a note to tell passenger, go to hell. What happened? New Yorker Ross Berenson found that TSA had dug into, broken, and tampered with his luggage, despite having a TSA-approved lock on his luggage. When he went to complain and get the form for that complaint, it had carbon copied in on multiple copies, go to hell. In other words, whoever asked for a complaint form would have that stamped on there. Nobody could give me any answers about what happened in LA, but they very politely told me if I wanted to file a complaint, I could fill out a form, Berenson told the Gothamist. However, when he filled out the form, it had the go to hell remark, just showing their attitude towards anyone complaining about their system, anyone speaking out, anyone not wanting to just submit and go along. But more submission is on the way, as we've exposed. The Big Brother transport bill is set to advance in Congress this week. Paul Joseph Watson has the report. A Big Brother transit bill that would empower the IRS to revoke passports of alleged tax delinquents and mandate the installation of black boxes in all cars, as well as a myriad of other privacy-busting measures, is set to take a huge leap forward this week and goes into the details of this terrible bill called the Moving Ahead for Progress in the 21st Century, MAP 21. Sounds very Agenda 21-esque. Other papers, such as the Investor's Business Daily, have called it a Stalinist assault on mobility rights. And indeed, that's what all dictatorships do. They keep the population under control, keep them from being able to move about freely, criticize the government, leave the country, and they have ways to mark and punish dissidents, either financially or with the rights of government, turning them into privileges and keeping people contained. But that's not all. We've got more and more on the cash ban. You heard months ago about how Louisiana had decided to ban the use of cash for secondhand purchases such as pawn shops, garage sales, on and on. Well, that's happening in Europe as well as they deal with austerity and more under their larger economic problems. Well, the technocrats from Mario Monti in Italy to those in Spain and the others have began to clamp down on using cash for large purchases. In one case in Spain, moving down to 2,500 euros at a time, saying anything more is suspect and likely criminal in an attempt to avoid taxes. Other countries, such as in Spain and as in Italy, take that 2,500 euro mark and push it down towards 1,000 euros, saying anything more than 1,000 is now beginning to become a little bit suspicious. They have similar moves in the UK and other countries. So you can see the larger global government is beginning to move us more and more onto the cashless control grid, and cash itself is becoming more and more suspect and criminalized. That is a report from A.M. Freyed, another fine contributor to the INFOWARS. Moving on, I wrote a short flashback article about other GMO problems we're seeing. We've covered the gamut on how GMO crops are causing organ failure, sterility, other bizarre damage and deformities, a kind of a cloaked long-term third-generation masked infertility among rats that have been tested and others in studies. Now, going back to 2002, we see another very dangerous aspect of the whole GMO movement. Flashback, escaped mutated GM maize on the loose, maybe carrying AIDS virus. Now, a lot of people misinterpreted this. I'm not saying you're literally going to contract AIDS from some piece of corn out there. What I'm trying to highlight is the fact that they're doing dangerous experimental test vaccines that they're growing in crops under this new pharmaceutical GMO crops thing that they've got going on, and how that itself is tainting other crops. It's escaped, it's gone wild, and we don't really know what the effects are. Now, pull yourself back from this article. Look at the larger picture. We know autoimmune diseases are on the rise. AIDS, or autoimmune disorder syndrome, is just one of those, of course, as we know it to be basically the worst, but you've got Crohn's and a bunch of other varieties all on the uptick without any sign of slowing down. Where did it all come from? We know we have environmental, vaccine, food factors, and on, and this may be just worsening that problem. Now, going back to 2002, you've got a company called Prodigy, because they're prodigies and such geniuses, based in A&M University in College Station here in Texas, and they got approval from the USDA to conduct more than 85 open-air trials of their pharmaceutical drugs grown in GM maize varieties, and they decided to grow them right out in the open in the Midwest in places like Iowa and Nebraska, where they were allowed to openly contaminate. And you've heard all the cases about farmers who want to grow organic, don't want the Monsanto seed, and yet they get sued because their crops are contaminated by 1% or less of Monsanto's GMO crops, and then they have to pay in court. Their whole agriculture's ruined. Well, this happened in a different context where their trials escaped admittedly tainted crops, first in Nebraska. The USDA knew about it, but they covered it up, allowed Prodigy, the geniuses of GMO, to continue doing what they're doing. And then they had another contamination case where one of their mystery viruses, which included the AIDS vaccine, a derivative for that, which included a blood clotting agent, which included a digestive enzyme that produces insulin, industrial adhesives, and on, all these bizarre experimental vaccines. They're growing in GM corn, and it admittedly was not cleaned up properly and later tainted a soya crop that was planted in the same space. It led to a criminal investigation, but the company was just slapped on the wrist with a $250,000 fine. The company wasn't stopped. They've been continuing to grow to this day. Other companies like Monsanto or Dow Chemical continue to do their own experiments. But it's a lesson of how there could be open-air contamination, unexpected consequences to GMO, including in these very dangerous varieties. AIDS vaccines should raise a lot of questions, especially since many of these vaccines are known to contain the elements that cause the disease itself. Weaker strains of them, so-called attenuated strains, are used to develop vaccines, yet they are part and participle to the actual disease. And this stuff has unknown contamination levels as worldwide diseases continue to climb, as the health of Americans and other Western nations continues to decline, and as globalists continue to tell us how they need to cull the population one way or another and how we had better go along with their plans. That's the real story here. I hope you can see it for yourself. It's not that you're going to catch AIDS from eating GMO corn. It's that they're contaminating the earth recklessly, wildlessly, as Alex has often warned about. Let's turn now to our daily quote. It comes from Ron Paul. It's about his legacy of sticking to his word. I will always vote what I have promised and always vote the Constitution. As well, I will not vote for one single penny that isn't paid for, because debt is the monster. Debt is what's going to eat us up, and that is why our economy is on the brink. Ron Paul, not sure on the year of that, but he has indeed had a career-long, consistent message, and we wish him the best as he attempts to contend just the political spectrum of our ongoing operations in the U.S. as we try to restore the republic and rein in some kind of sensible government, something closely related to the Constitution, instead of the overtly Marxist world government aims they have. We'll be back after this with Yuri Masson, a key researcher into the world government and eugenics model. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Spread the word. INFOWARS Nightly News.
Welcome to INFOWARS.com. This is Sam Vaughn reporting from Charlotte, North Carolina. In today's breaking news, an independent study conducted by the clergymen of the United States of America has released data indicating that of known and investigated satanic church locations in the United States, at least 50% are in close physical proximity to an orphanage. The implications of this are far and wide. The research states that many of the orphans seem to be affiliated with the closely located satanic church and are sponsored, in effect, by this satanic church. And quite a few go on to be policemen, judges, lawyers, local businessmen, and even some senators and congressmen.
We're going to focus tonight's broadcast on a news story that I think most of you are familiar with. The tragic death, senseless murder of a teenage boy of color whose killer has yet to be brought to justice. And no, I'm not talking about Trayvon Martin. I'm talking about a different young man, Abdurrahman al-Awlaki. Now, this 16-year-old boy, born in Denver, Colorado, a U.S. citizen, was struck down from the sky by a Predator drone missile, or drone kill, as it's been dubbed, while at a barbecue with his cousins in Yemen last October 2011. Now, the boy's only crime, of course, was that his father, Anwar al-Awlaki, himself a U.S. citizen, he was also drone killed 2 weeks prior to that. He was suspected of being an al-Qaeda operative. Emphasis on the word suspected, never proven. In fact, no evidence was ever even presented. Both were killed as part of a secret assassination program, which became not so secret back in 2010. There's an article here from the Washington Post, written by Dana Priest.
I'm Trisha Bracken, reporting for INFOWARS.com. I'm here at Oaksterdam University, which was raided by the DEA and the IRS on April 2nd, along with founder Richard Lee's medical marijuana dispensary and his private home. This is contrary to President Obama's promise to respect states' rights when it comes to medical marijuana. Protesters during the raid even yelled at the agents to go home. And at a rally in San Francisco afterwards, they also yelled, "You lie, Obama," and called for an end to this federal interference in California. Though he was not charged with any crime yet, the intimidation seems to have worked on Richard Lee. He has announced that he will be giving up ownership of all of his marijuana-related businesses. The federal raid on Lee, who's a respected community member here in Oakland, is a sad example of the government's infringement of our states' rights and our personal liberty.
Info Warriors. This is Mary Ellen Moore for INFOWARS.com. I'm originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm heading to Austin, Texas for my permanent move. I'm here today to try to become part of the InfoWars reporter team. The world is upside down,